We have a major trade update as NBA insider Jake Fischer shares his thoughts about the possibilities for the Chicago Bulls in making a trade this season. We're going to be talking about what Jake Fischer had to say and if the Chicago Bulls are going to make a major move this season. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and welcome to another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today we are talking about what Jake Fischer had to say as he made an appearance on CHGO podcast. Make sure that you go out there and check that out. Like and subscribe. They do some great content around the Chicago Bulls. But anyway, they interview Jake Fischer. They asked him various questions. One surfaced around Zach LaVine, around Vooch, and then also too just about the team and if they were going to make a move this season. And so let's start with Zach LaVine and really what he had to say with Zach LaVine. And so here's what we know going into this. Zach LaVine is playing at an all-star level. I think that Zach LaVine has certainly really shredded a lot of the narratives that were in or going around him in the offseason, whether it was the injury concerns, whether it was contributing to winning basketball. I think that he's done both of those things. I think that he's done a terrific job as far as being professional out there. And he's also been locked in on the defensive end as well. And so I think that Zach LaVine has really done a great job. And I'd have to think that, his trade value has to be much, much higher than it has been before in the past. And so with that being said, that leads me to the first thing that Jake Fischer had to say. This is in the first portion of the show. And just, kind of taking a quote out of a bigger quote here, but he's saying that some of the things that are going to be a hurdle from moving on from Zach LaVine is it's not just the contract. It's not just the CBA. I think it's the injury history as well. I think it's a pretty big deterrent of him being considered anything close to a positive trade value right now. And so he lists three things. He's talking about the injury, he's talking about the CBA and the contract. And so let's start with the CBA part. And so I think that, with the CBA part, it is going to be difficult really on any team trying to trade for a player because that goes into really what we were talking about just a couple days ago with these aprons. And if you're over that first apron, once again, you cannot take back more money than you send out, and the other team is going to be taking in more money. And then if you're over that second apron, that is going to be tough for you as well. You cannot take in more money. And then also, too, you cannot put multiple players together to make a deal. So that means if you want a $30 million player, then you need to have a $30 million player to trade. You're not going to be able to put multiple players together to make a trade. And so, that goes into the CBA part. And then as far as the contract, we know that Zach LaVine is owed $138 million, with the rest of this contract. And he's also got a player option. And so that is something that teams are absolutely going to have to consider. And the last part, when he's talking about the injury history, that's where it just really makes you wonder, especially if you're, a Bulls fan and you want to see really the Bulls move on in a different direction and move off of Zach LaVine. That is going to be tough because I think that he's done a terrific job as far as really shredding that narrative for the most part right now. I know, he's played 22 out of the 25 games, so maybe most GMs are saying it's just too small of a sample size. I can understand that. But one of the things that Jake Fischer says too, in this bigger quote is that, he's not a 24-year-old bouncy athlete anymore. He's a bouncy athlete who has a lot of miles and has missed a lot of games on those legs. And so, if GMs are thinking that, it just makes me wonder how much more can, Zach LaVine really show in order for a team to say, okay, I'm interested now? Because if he's playing at an all-star level, I think he's doing a great job as far as, managing these little things. I know he's missed a couple games due to some little injuries, but, hopefully he doesn't get any major injuries. But he cannot go back to being 24, and he certainly can't go back and take back these injuries that have happened to him. And so that is definitely going to be challenging, I think, moving forward for the Chicago Bulls. And really, that just goes into a lot of these sliding pieces that are really, kind of out of the Chicago Bulls' control at this point in time. So next up, let's go into what he's talking about with Vooch. And so when asked about, players that could maybe be moved or most likely to be moved, he's saying that Lonzo Ball is a player that he thinks with, his defensive prowess right now, the way that he's defending and the expiring contract, he's a player that certainly could be moved. With Vooch, he's shooting the basketball very well. It's quite possible that he could be moved, talking about that. And he also says that Vooch is a plug and play. So meaning that, if teams go out there and get him, he's going to be a player that you can go ahead and plug him right in and you can kind of roll with him at this point in time, for those teams that are looking to get him. Now, when they did ask him, like, is Vooch one of the top 10 trade targets out there? And he was like, no, I don't think that he's one of the top 10 trade targets. And in fact, he thinks that this trading season, it's going to come down to just teams going out there for the players who have amazing value. So he's looking like for these amazing value deals. And he compares it to like Jonas Valanciunas. And so when I looked at that, I thought that was interesting because with Vooch, he does have a more favorable contract than Zach LaVine at $20 million this year, and then he has 21 and some change the next year. But in comparison, if teams are looking at a player like Valanciunas, I mean, there is a bit of a difference. Now, I know that Vooch is absolutely balling out. He's a top center. I totally get it. But if teams are just simply looking at just the contract standpoint and you're just looking to get a center, then certainly it does make sense that you definitely go out there and you go in a different direction when it comes down to it, because here's Valanciunas in comparison to Vooch, and you look at the fact that Valanciunas at $10 million, that is a bargain deal if teams are going to go out there and get him versus if you're going out there for Vooch. And so, again, not saying that LaVine and Vooch cannot be moved, but these are some of the hurdles that might be out there, for the Chicago Bulls as far as moving off of both of these players. And so I totally get that when you're talking about comparison and the value deal. And to take it a step further, one of the players that I talked about just a couple of days ago was Cam Johnson. And so just if you were to compare what the situation is from a Cam Johnson and say a Zach LaVine, if you're looking at that, you can definitely see that with Zach LaVine, you see that it's going to cost you a lot more versus with Cam Johnson, you're getting him at I think right around $68 million is left on his contract for the 3 years. So $68 million versus $138 million. Maybe teams are thinking, look, I still can get a player that can really help us scoring and get a pretty good defender, and it's going to cost me not as much. And so these are some of the things that, yes, I think clearly are in the way of moving off these players. Not saying that it can happen. One of the things that Jake Fischer does mention is that as time goes along, as this contract now turns into a 2-year deal versus, a 2.5-year deal, then that's something that maybe a team would want to jump on in a Zach LaVine deal. And same with Vooch. Like, as time goes along, you're thinking about it, like, yes, if you're getting him on an expiring deal, yes, it makes sense. And I still think that, with Vooch and how much he's paid, it's not that bad. But again, with the way that the CBA is, with the way the salary cap is, I can certainly understand where those hurdles are at. And so that leads me to the last part of what Jake Fischer had to say. And this was towards the end. And this is something that I think a lot of people were talking about, and really just lets you know just the situation that the Chicago Bulls are in, and just shows you actually what has happened to really lead up to this point, because I think that it's very telling, especially when you look down at that last line where it says that the Bulls, there's so many sliding parts. I just don't think the Bulls are Utah, Washington, or Brooklyn. Like, we're selling. I think we're willing to sell everyone, but it's a matter of what's going to come in. And so, because of the Bulls being in a situation where they have so many different things that could be a hurdle to move on from players, it's going to be challenging. And I think that it really goes back to the Bulls just putting themselves in this situation. I think it comes back to the lack of direction. I think that that's what we're seeing. And I also think that the lack of direction is hurting them right now. They're not sure which way to go at this point. They don't have a certain plan. And I get it, with the prices, and you're looking at that because I know you don't want to go into a deal and say, if you are having to move on from LaVine, you don't want to attach assets, because what you're doing then is you're actually putting yourself in a far worse situation. You do not want to do that. You don't want to dig yourself another hole. So I understand that. And then with the way that these players are playing, you don't want to go out there and take, players that are playing at an all-star level and take something that is just far less. An example with Vooch, when you think about it, if it's true that his starting price is at 2 second-round picks, I get it. But for Drummond last year, it was reported that the Sixers were looking to give 2 second-round picks for Andre Drummond. And here's Vooch, man, he's playing at a high level. And so you would just think that the Bulls are saying, man, 2 second-round picks, that's going to be tough to move. And so that's where it's going to be interesting for this team, because you have your prices high. I understand that you're trying to get the most. Hopefully, maybe it makes a lot more sense as this team moves a little bit closer to the trade deadline, but you also don't want to get lowballed. And so if you are in a situation where it's looking like, that this team is going to essentially have perhaps Zach LaVine for the foreseeable future. We don't know about Vooch. I still think that that's a very movable contract right now. But hey, there might be a situation where both of those players are with this team for the foreseeable future, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on them, especially if they're trying to keep this pick. And I totally agree with the fact that I've said this before on another video, that I just don't think that this front office is ready for a full-on rebuild. I don't think that they can stomach that. I don't think that they are ready to rip the Band-Aid off. I don't think that they're ready to go all in on the pool there and just start to swim in that. And I think that that's tough. That's something that is definitely holding this franchise back, having 1 foot into a rebuild and 1 foot out. And then also, too, it's tough now because, we don't know what this team could have gotten for some of these players. A couple years ago, I'd love to see maybe what the Mavericks were offering, for Zach LaVine, if they were looking to go ahead and trade for him a couple seasons ago. But you're maybe not going to get the true value for both of those players. And so that is going to be challenging for the Chicago Bulls as they try to figure out a direction. And then lastly, I wonder how much more do teams need to really see? Going back to something that Jake Fischer was talking about with the injury history, like I said, I think that Zach LaVine has done a terrific job, and I wonder how much does he need to show in order to get a team to commit. And so these are some of the things that I'm personally wondering about, and some of the things that I'm thinking about with this team moving forward. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this recent news and recently what Jake Fischer has to say about the Chicago Bulls, and really saying you might see much of the same here. So do you think that the Chicago Bulls are going to make a move? Do you think that they're not going to make a move? I'd love to hear what the comments are. And I just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It means a lot as we try to reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NBA season out there. I want to let you know about 68.3% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel, so make sure that you go ahead and slam dunk on that subscribe button for us, as it means a lot as we try to reach that goal. Look, even though this is definitely some tough news to hear, if this is true, who knows if this is what is actually going on. It's very tough, but hopefully this Bulls team is able to get a direction. Hopefully this team is able to perhaps get some buyers here at the trade deadline and really get this team moving in the right direction, because I think that as constructed right now, this team is not anywhere near where it needs to be to get out of the Eastern Conference. I think that we still need to really do some major things to this roster, and we probably need to move some players out of the way to maximize the player development and to continue to evaluate. So anyway, let me know what you're thinking in the comments, and as I usually say, even if it looks tough, I'm still saying go Bulls, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.